Let's be real. Feeling bitter towards someone doesn't always involve shouting or angry words. It often brews quietly beneath the surface, masked by fake smiles, a lack of interest, or even little, indirect hostile behaviors. You may have felt this before, a sense of discomfort around a person without knowing why, only to discover later they were secretly hoping you'd fail. It's a tiring experience. The reality is, if you don't notice these subtle hints, you'll waste your time and energy on relationships that harm you. Today, we're exploring 7 clear signs that someone secretly holds a grudge against you. It might be unpleasant to face, but understanding this is vital for your peace of mind. We'll see how modern Stoicism can assist us in seeing through the pretense and finding inner calm. One key sign is when someone feels like you don't accept them. This creates an unspoken strain that frequently shows up as resentment. Research shows that people holding grudges in relationships are often worried about whether their partner truly accepts them. But why is acceptance so important in relationships? It's more than just putting up with someone's oddities. It's about fully welcoming them, including their imperfections. When someone truly feels accepted, it's a deeply comforting experience. Feeling accepted provides comfort in a world that often criticizes us. This approval lets us unwind, let go of our guards, and be our true selves. It's similar to the safe emotional space we hopefully experienced as kids. Being accepted as adults gives us the courage to try new things, be open, and believe we won't be turned away for it. The Stoics believed it's vital to understand ourselves and other people. Marcus Aurelius advised accepting our destiny and loving those we meet along the way. This strong feeling of belonging and approval is the base of solid, good relationships. Without it, bitterness can easily grow, especially when someone feels ignored or misunderstood. Think of a middle-aged man who's worked hard to support his family. He's done everything correctly, but he starts to feel his wife doesn't appreciate his efforts anymore. She pulls away quietly, and their closeness fades. While nothing is said directly, the stress grows, and he feels unvalued and invisible. If this continues, bitterness can silently destroy their relationship. This is why modern Stoicism encourages facing difficult realities, both within ourselves and in our connections with others. A tough mindset, often linked to Stoic strength, teaches us to deal with these feelings quickly and bravely discuss them. In our busy modern lives, it's easy to miss the small signs of unhappiness in our relationships with our jobs, families, and loved ones. With our busy lives and many aims constantly vying for our attention, it's easy to lose touch with others. Stoicism, an ancient philosophy, offers a way to stay calm and centered. One of its key principles for finding inner peace is to be mindful of what's happening in our relationships and to deal with small problems promptly before they become big ones. For instance, if a friend keeps canceling plans or seems withdrawn, don't just assume they're occupied. Reach out and check if they're okay. It might feel awkward initially, but as the philosopher Seneca noted, challenges make our minds tougher, just as exercise strengthens our bodies. Tackling these challenges directly will make your relationships stronger and stop resentment from quietly growing. To illustrate this, consider a workplace example. Imagine you're in your 60s with extensive career experience. You've guided younger coworkers and helped the company expand. Lately, however, a younger colleague has been unfriendly, brief, and less cooperative. You think they might be envious of your position or accomplishments. Instead of letting this suspicion grow, Stoicism suggests approaching the situation with understanding and logic. Recognize that the younger colleague might feel insecure or undervalued and make an effort to connect with them. This doesn't mean ignoring your own successes, but finding a way to make them feel noticed and appreciated. As the Stoics advise, focus on what you can manage. Your actions, your words, and how you treat others, and let go of everything else. Then let go of everything else. This principle applies to all relationships, whether with romantic partners or family. In our modern world, where we're constantly connected digitally but often feel emotionally distant, it's common for people to feel angry or bitter when they believe they're being overlooked or not appreciated. It's easy to miss the signs that someone is feeling this way. However, by paying close attention, like the Stoics taught, we can start to see the small hints. These clues might include indirect hostile remarks, a lack of interest during conversations, or even shifts in how they hold themselves. Once you spot these signs, it's important to talk about them calmly and directly. You could say something like, "I've noticed you seem a little withdrawn recently. Is there something we should discuss?" This shows you understand emotions and also follows the Stoic ideas of clear communication and logical conversation. When someone feels dismissed or judged, even if you didn't mean to, it can create feelings of anger and bitterness that slowly increase over time, often without anyone realizing it. A study in 2018 showed how anger and resentment are often spread through everyday conversations in relationships, with feelings of rejection or disapproval being a major factor. Resentment is like a hidden current, gradually weakening the connection between people, whether it's in friendships, work relationships, or family bonds. Perhaps unintentionally, overlooking someone in a meeting or receiving a promotion they really wanted can make them feel wronged. In these situations, the resentment doesn't appear as a big, dramatic argument. Instead, it leaks out in indirect, hostile ways. Maybe it's the slight eye rolls when you talk or the sarcastic remarks that hurt more than they seem to. It's worse when people go quiet. It feels like they're constantly disapproving, like a dark cloud always raining down criticism where they used to be encouraging. These little things might be more than just chance. They could mean something bigger is happening. We need to learn to be more aware, like the Stoics taught, and notice not just how we react, but also how others act around us, without guessing right away what it means. Marcus Aurelius wisely said that what we hear are just opinions, not facts, and what we see are just viewpoints, not the whole truth. This idea helps us look past what people do on the surface and think about the feelings that might be causing those actions. When dealing with hidden anger or resentment, the first important thing is to see the signs. Modern Stoicism teaches us to be aware and see things as they really are, not as we want them to be. After you've noticed the small changes in how someone is acting, the next thing to do is to deal with it openly and kindly. Don't get defensive, which is usually our first reaction. Instead, try to have a calm and truthful talk. Ask yourself what might have caused their reaction. Could it be something you did that hurt them without you meaning to, even if their reaction seems unfair? Dealing with the problem directly is important. Like the Stoics said, you can only control what you do and say and your willingness to fix the relationship. You can't control how other people feel or act. Here's a story you might relate to. A man in his late 40s worked very hard for his company, always trying to be a good teammate and leader. One day, a younger coworker got a promotion he had secretly wanted. Suddenly, things changed between them. His once friendly coworker started canceling meetings, gave short, unenthusiastic answers, and even started making mean comments during team meetings. At first, the man didn't understand why. He thought it was just stress or too much work. But as time went on, it became obvious something else was going on. His colleague resented his experience and status, feeling that his own hard work had gone unnoticed. Instead of letting the resentment fester, the man, guided by Stoic principles, chose to address the situation directly. He initiated a private conversation, calmly expressing that he noticed the change in their dynamic and genuinely asking if there was something they needed to clear up. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it cleared the air. His colleague admitted to feeling overshadowed and overlooked, and from there, they were able to rebuild their working relationship. This story is a perfect example of how applying Stoic rules such as empathy and self-awareness can help us navigate complex emotions and prevent resentment from destroying valuable connections. Now, think about your own life. Have you ever been in a similar situation where you felt someone's attitude toward you had changed, but you couldn't quite pinpoint why? It's easy to react with frustration or to simply withdraw, but that only deepens the divide. Modern Stoicism teaches us to take a step back, reflect on the situation without emotional reactivity, and then decide how to act with reason and virtue. Seneca said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When we face potential resentment, we have the choice to either escalate the situation or diffuse it through understanding and communication. Resentment can be a slow, silent killer in any relationship. If left unchecked, it's not always easy to spot, but the cues are often there. If we pay attention, maybe they've stopped complimenting your work, or their once supportive tone has turned critical. These subtle changes are like warning lights on a dashboard. Ignoring them won't stop the problem, but addressing them early can prevent bigger issues down the road. The Stoics remind us that life will present us with challenges, both big and small, but it's how we handle them that defines our character. In every interaction, we have the opportunity to apply Stoic principles, whether it's through patience, understanding, or simply remaining calm in the face of adversity. If you notice someone in your life acting differently, pulling away, criticizing, or showing signs of passive-aggressive resentment, don't ignore it. Take a step back and assess the situation without jumping to conclusions. Ask yourself if there's something you can address and approach the person with openness, seeking to understand rather than to accuse. Remember, as Marcus Aurelius said, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Approach difficult situations with clarity and wisdom, and you'll find that many of these issues can be resolved before they cause lasting damage. By following Stoic rules, focusing on what you can control and accepting that some things are beyond your influence, you'll build stronger, more resilient relationships and protect your inner peace. They're aggressive towards you. When someone harbors silent resentment toward you, it can often manifest in verbal, physical, or even social aggression. It might begin subtly with sharp comments or sarcastic jabs, but over time, it can escalate into something more toxic. According to research, those who carry resentment or anger toward others are far more likely to show aggression in some form, be it verbal attacks or even physical outbursts. But let's be clear here. We're not talking about the occasional eye roll at a bad joke. We're talking about deep-seated resentment that brews over time, eventually surfacing in a way that poisons the atmosphere of your relationship, turning interactions into hostile encounters. This kind of aggression doesn't just affect the person on the receiving end. It also chips away at the emotional well-being of the one harboring the resentment. It's a lose situation for everyone involved. Think about it. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's anger toward you felt disproportionate or ongoing? If so, it's worth considering whether resentment is driving that aggression. One thing to remember is that this kind of behavior is not just a poor way of coping with emotions. It crosses boundaries that should never be violated. Physical or verbal aggression, in any form, is unacceptable as it erodes trust and leaves lasting emotional scars on both sides. You might notice subtle signs first. A friend who once laughed with you now speaks in biting tones, or a colleague who once supported you now seems to undercut your efforts. This form of behavior not only drains the relationship, but also leaves you feeling diminished. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." In this case, how we react to others' aggression can either de-escalate a volatile situation or help us recognize when it's time to protect ourselves by walking away. Modern Stoicism teaches us that respecting boundaries and fostering open communication are fundamental to any healthy relationship. But what do we do when someone has clearly crossed those lines? If you're dealing with verbal or physical aggression, it's essential to acknowledge that you deserve respect and kindness, not hostility. The Stoic lesson here is to focus on what we can control: our own behavior, our reactions, and our willingness to set boundaries. You have the right to speak up against this kind of treatment and demand open, respectful communication. If the other person refuses to meet you halfway, then it may be time to distance yourself from that relationship. After all, as Seneca wisely said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Sometimes we fear the consequences of standing up for ourselves more than the reality of what it might bring. But standing up for your emotional health and well-being is vital, even if it means walking away from a toxic situation. Pay attention to shifts in behavior. Is someone constantly undermining you, making hurtful remarks, or pushing boundaries in ways that make you uncomfortable? These are the red flags that should never be ignored. Sometimes it's easy to dismiss early signs of aggression, especially if they come from someone close to us. The Stoic principles of resilience and self-control guide us to respond calmly and rationally, even in the face of aggression. However, Stoicism doesn't teach us to be passive or to accept mistreatment. Quite the opposite. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, reminds us, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This doesn't mean we should tolerate unacceptable behavior. Rather, it means we should rise above it. We maintain our integrity by refusing to stoop to the level of those who treat us poorly. Yet, that doesn't mean staying in a harmful situation. It means having the courage to remove ourselves from it, if necessary. They experience high levels of jealousy. Jealousy is a powerful emotion that, when left unchecked, can quietly evolve into resentment, creating tension and driving wedges in our most cherished relationships. Researchers pointed out that jealousy is often closely linked to anger, which puts relationships at risk of spiraling into destructive behaviors, sometimes even aggression. But what exactly does jealousy look like in your daily life? It's important to understand that a little jealousy is normal. It's part of human nature and can even signify that someone values you. However, it's when jealousy crosses into unhealthy territory that it becomes dangerous, silently eating away at the trust and harmony in a relationship. Now consider how jealousy might appear. In your romantic life, you receive some friendly attention from a coworker or a compliment from a barista instead of your partner, shrugging it off as harmless. They suddenly become overprotective or start questioning your motives. This reaction isn't necessarily about mistrust more often. It stems from their own fears. Fear of losing you, fear of inadequacy, or even fear of being easily replaced, these insecurities, if not addressed, can fester and turn into resentment. As the Stoics teach us, the key is to understand that these emotions don't define us, but how we handle them. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Addressing jealousy means facing it head-on with empathy and understanding, rather than letting it poison the relationship. But jealousy doesn't just appear in romantic relationships. It can surface in friendships and even professional settings. Think about those subtle, backhanded compliments you might hear. "Oh, you're so lucky to land that amazing job." On the surface, it sounds like praise, but beneath it is a bitter undertone. What they're really saying is, "I wish I had that success, and it bothers me that you do." How do we handle this first? It's crucial to recognize the signs of jealousy. When they appear, pay attention to patterns. Does someone consistently find ways to undermine your successes or question your motives? Are they making comments that seem like praise but leave you feeling unsettled? These are red flags that shouldn't be ignored once you recognize jealousy. It's important to address it, either with the person directly or by adjusting your expectations of the relationship. As Stoicism teaches us, we cannot control others' feelings, but we can control how we react to them. Epic teacher said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." If someone's jealousy is becoming toxic, you have the right to distance yourself from that relationship, or if appropriate, to have an open conversation about it. Often people don't realize their jealousy is showing, and bringing it up in a kind and empathetic way can help clear the air. It's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about fostering honest communication and maintaining the respect that every relationship needs to thrive in modern life. Jealousy is everywhere, especially in today's hyper-competitive world, where success is often measured by external accomplishments. Whether it's in the workplace, where promotions and achievements can spark feelings of inadequacy, or in personal relationships, where social media constantly compares our lives to others, jealousy is an emotion we all encounter. But through modern Stoicism, we learn that jealousy, when understood and managed, can actually serve as a guide to our own insecurities. Instead of letting it turn into resentment, we can use it as an opportunity for self-reflection, asking ourselves what it is that we're truly afraid of as you navigate it. Relationships, whether romantic, friendships, or professional, be aware of jealousy's subtle signs and the impact it can have if left unchecked. Be mindful of your own responses and don't hesitate to confront the issue if it's creating tension. Stoic secrets remind us that the goal is not to suppress or ignore emotions, but to understand and manage them with wisdom. If you've ever experienced someone shutting you out or stonewalling in a relationship, how did you handle it? Let us know in the comments by sharing your experience with a simple "I faced it" or "I've been there." They're stonewalling, or refusing to communicate. When someone refuses to communicate, or engages in stonewalling, it's a glaring sign that something deeper is amiss. A long-term study on marriages over 2 decades found that one of the most common emotional behaviors linked to resentment is stonewalling. But what exactly is stonewalling? The researchers define it as the complete shutdown of listening, when one partner tunes out in response to the other's requests for change, whether through criticism, worry, or what's sometimes perceived as nagging. It's not just a temporary break in communication or a momentary lapse of attention. Stonewalling is more like wearing noise-canceling headphones during an important conversation, ignoring not only the words but also the emotions behind them. When this happens, the underlying issues in a relationship don't just disappear. They pile up, and with them, resentment grows. Think of stonewalling as a brick wall slowly being built between two people, each unspoken word, each ignored concern, adds another brick, until the wall becomes so tall that neither side can see or hear the other. It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about avoiding the resolution of that conflict. And in any relationship, whether it's a romantic one, a friendship, or a professional relationship, avoiding the problem doesn't make it go away. It's much like Marcus Aurelius once said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one in the context of relationships. This means taking action, rather than letting silence be the answer. Relationships thrive on communication, not on shutting each other out. You know there's a problem, but without communication, there's no way to address it. This lack of engagement can be one of the most telling signs of resentment. They may not be saying the words, but the silence speaks volumes. It's a way of signaling, I don't want to deal with this, and I don't care to resolve it. And the more it continues, the more damage it does in modern life. We often encounter this kind of behavior, not just in romantic relationships, but also in friendships and even at work. Maybe a colleague stops responding to your emails or avoids meetings where important decisions are being made. Perhaps a friend who once confided in you now gives one-word answers, clearly shutting down any meaningful conversation. These are all examples of stonewalling in action. In this story, a couple married for 20 years slowly drifts apart. The husband, feeling overburdened by work and daily stresses, begins to withdraw from conversations with his wife whenever she brings up something that's bothering her. Whether it's about household responsibilities or emotional concerns, he simply shuts down, barely responding. His wife, sensing this lack of engagement, becomes more frustrated, and in turn, she begins to nag as a way of trying to get through to him. The more she tries to talk, the more he stonewalls, creating a vicious cycle of resentment instead of addressing the issues head-on. They both avoid them, and the unresolved feelings pile up brick by brick by brick. This kind of emotional dynamic doesn't just damage the relationship. It can leave lasting scars. Stoics believed in addressing issues with reason and clarity. According to Epictetus, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it, that matters. When stonewalling occurs, both parties are reacting poorly to the challenges in the relationship, whether it's through avoidance or through nagging. Modern Stoicism teaches us that instead of stonewalling, we should confront issues with patience and openness, fostering communication, instead of letting silence reign. But what can you do if you find yourself on the receiving end of stonewalling? First, recognize that it's not necessarily about you. Often the person doing the stonewalling may be overwhelmed or unsure of how to handle the situation. The best course of action is to approach them calmly, without escalating the tension. Ask open-ended questions, like, I've noticed you've been quiet lately. Can we talk about what's on your mind? This invites dialogue without placing blame. Remember, Stoic rules teach us to remain composed and in control of our own emotions. If they continue to avoid communication, it might be necessary to set boundaries, or even consider whether the relationship is healthy for you. At the heart of Stoic principles is the belief that we must engage with the challenges life presents, rather than run from them. Stonewalling is a way of running from conflict, and it only serves to deepen resentment on both sides. They disappear when you need support. Nothing reveals the true strength of a relationship. Like a crisis, it's easy to be surrounded by people when life is going smoothly. But when adversity strikes you, quickly find out who your real friends are. So what does it say when someone vanishes the moment you need them most? It's not just disappointing. It's a clear and painful sign that they're not as invested in you as you once believed. It's more than just flakiness. It's a red flag that shows you exactly where you stand in their life. And when someone pulls a disappearing act during your darkest hours, It doesn't just sting, it feels like betrayal. The absence of support during tough times is a neon warning that despite all the shared laughter, good times, is a neon warning that despite all the shared laughter, good times, and assurances this person doesn't care enough to be there when it truly matters. I learned this lesson the hard way during a rough chapter in my life. I was dealing with a deeply personal issue, something that shook me to my core. Naturally, I turned to the people I had always considered my close friends, expecting at least a message of support or a quick check-in, but the response silence. But that promised later never came. Their excuses piled up, but the support I needed never did. I felt abandoned, and the realization hit hard. These weren't true friends, at least not in the way I needed them to be. It wasn't about their business. It was about their priorities. Here's where things get controversial. People love to talk about how they'll always be there for you. They say things like, "Call me if you need anything," or "I'm always here for you." But when push comes to shove, many people are only around for the high points in your life, the parties, the celebrations, the successes. When things get messy, when life turns hard and uncomfortable, they disappear. And why? Because it's easier for them to avoid your problems than to confront them head on. Your pain, your struggles, your difficulties are not something they want to deal with, because deep down, they don't care enough to stand with you through the storm. Marcus Aurelius once said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never getting to live in this context." It's not the crisis itself. That's the problem. It's realizing that the people you trusted don't stand by you when life gets real. The hard truth is that true support isn't about convenience. It's about showing up when it's difficult, when it's uncomfortable, and when it's the last thing someone wants to do. The people who disappear when you're in the trenches aren't just being inconsiderate. They're showing you without words that your struggles aren't worth their time. They're saying your problems are too much for me to handle, and I don't value you enough to stick around. It's brutal, but recognizing this is necessary. The disappointment and heartache you feel when someone you've been there for doesn't return. The favor is a gut-wrenching realization. I remember being there for friends during their own crises, supporting them through breakups, family troubles, and career setbacks, only to find that when it was my turn to lean on them, they were nowhere to be found. That moment of recognition was like a punch to the gut, but it was also a wake-up call. It's easy to be there when everything's going well, but the real test of a relationship is how people respond when things fall apart. If someone disappears when you need the most, they weren't really there in the first place. Their absence shows that they weren't invested in the relationship in the way you thought. But don't let that make you bitter. Let it make you better, instead of wallowing in disappointment. Use it as a filter to sift out the people who don't deserve a place in your life. Those who stick around, check in, and show up when it's inconvenient. Those are the people who matter. Those are the people who matter. Those are the relationships worth nurturing and holding on to, because they're built on something real. In the end, life is too short to waste on fair weather. Friends, don't invest your energy in people who are only there for the good times. You deserve relationships with people who will stand by you in the storm, not just bask in the sunshine. True friendship, true support is about being there when the chips are down, when life gets messy, and when the easy thing would be to walk away. So when you find those rare individuals who stick around through the hard times, hold on to them tightly. They're worth more than gold. And as for those who disappear when you need the most, let them go. They've already shown you their true colors in the words of Epictetus. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having great possessions, but in having few wants. In this case, your wealth lies in knowing that you don't need to. Hold on to relationships that don't serve you. Focus on building an iron mind and cultivating connections that align with Stoic principles. Those that are resilient, genuine, and built on mutual respect and support. Modern Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control, and that includes who we choose to surround ourselves with. Don't hold on to people who vanish when life gets tough. Instead, surround yourself with those who value you, who are there, not just when life is good, but when it's challenging. They subtly exclude you from plans. It's the small things that often hurt the most, like realizing that you weren't invited to an event you would have loved to attend, a dinner, a party, or a weekend. A party or a weekend getaway with friends. You check your phone, see pictures of the event that you weren't a part of, and the first reaction might be confusion or disappointment, the common excuse. Oh, we thought you were too busy, or it was just a last-minute thing, we didn't think to invite you. But let's be honest here. These are not accidents. This type of social exclusion is subtle. But it's real, and it stings because it's deliberate. When someone values you, they don't just forget to include you. This is a form of passive-aggressive behavior that many people experience, but few address openly. These so-called friends hope you'll fade into the background without causing any confrontation, so they don't have to deal with the discomfort of openly admitting that they no longer value your presence as much. It's a way of pushing you out without having to say it outright, and unfortunately, it's all too common in modern relationships. I've been in this position too many times, and maybe you have too. One particular memory sticks out for me. I was scrolling through social media one weekend and saw pictures of a group of friends at an event I would have loved to be part of. The frustrating part wasn't just that I wasn't there, but that no one had even mentioned it to me beforehand. When I later asked them about it, casually, they were quick with their excuses. We thought you were busy, or it was just a last-minute thing, but I knew better. If they had wanted me there, they would have made sure I knew about it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't thoughtlessness. It was intentional exclusion. This is how people often, without direct confrontation, let you know that you're not as important to them as you once were. Here's where it gets tricky. It's much easier to pretend this isn't happening, to accept their excuses and convince yourself that it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, you know the truth. The more you allow these situations to slide, the more you let them decide where you stand in their lives. You're giving them control over your narrative instead of taking charge of your own. And this is something Marcus Aurelius, one of the key figures in Stoicism, would advise against. He teaches us through his writings to focus on what we can control, our own actions and responses, rather than giving others the power to dictate our sense of self-worth. I had to learn this the hard way for too long. I stayed silent, hoping that maybe next time I'd be included, that maybe it was all just an oversight. But the more I stayed quiet, the more I allowed myself to be pushed further and further out. It wasn't until I started confronting the issue head-on that things changed. I made the decision to ask the hard questions and let them know that I noticed the exclusion. Yes, it was uncomfortable, and yes, it was uncomfortable, and yes, made things awkward. But something interesting happened once I started addressing it directly. The dynamic shifted. Some people got defensive, and others tried to make up for it. Either way, the message was clear. I wasn't going to let myself be quietly pushed out without addressing the behavior. And that's the real lesson here. If someone values you, they'll make the effort to include you. No matter how last-minute the plan is, people who want you in their lives will find a way to make sure you're there. And if they don't, it's time to rethink the value of that. Relationship Stoicism teaches us to not attach our happiness to the approval of others. But that doesn't mean we should allow others to disrespect or disregard us. A true friend doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. They make it clear that they value your presence because they genuinely enjoy being around you. You deserve that kind of relationship in your life. In modern life, where relationships can often become superficial, social exclusion can be even more painful because it plays out in subtle ways through texts, social media posts, or group chats. We've become conditioned to ignore these red flags in our relationships for fear of creating conflict. But this approach is harmful in the long run, as Stoicism teaches us, particularly through the works of Marcus Aurelius. We must live according to our values, and one of those values is self-respect. If someone doesn't respect you enough to include you in their lives, or makes you feel like an afterthought, it's time to step back and reassess the relationship. The deep message here is one that resonates with Stoicism. Control what you can, and let go of what you cannot. You cannot control whether people choose to exclude you, but you can control how you respond to it. You can choose to walk away from relationships that make you feel less than you are. And that's a powerful decision. Surround yourself with those who uplift you, who value your presence, and who make the effort to include you, not because they have to, but because they want to. That's the kind of friendship you deserve. And that's the kind of friendship Marcus Aurelius would tell you to cherish. After all, life's too short to waste on relationships that don't bring you genuine joy and fulfillment in the end. Relationships, whether with partners, friends, or colleagues, thrive on communication, trust, and understanding. When resentment creeps in, often in the form of jealousy, aggression, or stonewalling, it's a sign that something deeper needs to be addressed. By applying the timeless wisdom of Stoicism, we can learn to recognize these signs, confront them with patience, and create space for healthier, stronger connections. Let's nurture those thoughts with wisdom and courage, knowing that clear communication is the key to lasting peace and harmony.